It's the debut of the Cosell Files, and this week is all about the top players in the 2021 NFL Draft. After Trevor Lawrence, who is NFL ready right now? We'll work through the best options at receiver and corner, and Greg will tell you which pass rushers are likely scheme specific. It's time to open File 1.
For over 4 decades, Greg Cosell has provided unparalleled analysis for NFL films. Now, he's bringing the X's and O's directly to you. It's time to open the Cosell Files. From the Outkick Network, here's your host, Jonathan Hutton.
Welcome to the Cosell Files. I'm Jonathan Hutton of Outkick with NFL Films senior producer Greg Cosell, who is also co-host of NFL Matchup on ESPN, as well as a weekly contributor heard every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern on Outkick 360 with Chad Withrow, Paul Koharski, and me. Greg, thank you for having me along for the ride here on the podcast. I can't wait to talk football with you each week.
I think I'm the one who should be saying thank you, Jonathan. So I'm pretty excited about this. Just kind of a free form, talk some ball, and see where we go.
Talking ball. And as a subscriber, every Thursday and in the afternoon, you can expect a new podcast ready for you to tune in or watch at your convenience. So after subscribing, Greg and I hope that you'll rate and review. So that helps us spread the word about the podcast that's available across the entire Outkick network. Today's episode, all about the top players in the NFL draft. And our objective, Greg, it's not to mock the first round or predict what we think will happen. It's about putting players in the context of the NFL.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing. So many people look at college players, they watch them on Saturdays, and they think in terms of, oh, they're great college players. So if they're great in college, particularly in the big conferences like the SEC, Jonathan, and you're an SEC country, that means automatically they'll be great NFL players. And there's so many differences between the college game and the NFL game, and it really doesn't quite work like that. I mean, clearly guys come in the league and are good right away. We know that. But the bottom line is that there's no really truly finished product coming from college to the NFL. Even the players who play well initially, they don't really come in as truly finished products.
We'll discuss many of them and high in the first round throughout the File 1 here and some themes of the first round, Greg, and how it shapes this entire draft. And we start with the quarterback discussion, as everyone across the country is discussing right now.
Yep.
But let's go a layer or two deeper here. And the maneuvering that it takes in the race to get your guy. Round 1, it could feature 4 quarterbacks drafted to begin. That would be a first. And we've seen 3 straight quarterbacks selected to begin the draft 2 other times. It was in 99 with Tim Couch, Donovan McNabb, and Akili Smith. And in 71 with Plunkett, Manning, and Pastorini.
I remember that.
Greg, did you evaluate them all? I'm sure you have.
No, not back in 71, but I remember that very well, believe it or not.
We know that if a team doesn't have their quarterback, Greg, that they have to, for lack of a better way to phrase this, force the issue and draft their guy. Right. Do you really see 5 top quarterbacks in this class? Of this group, how many quarterbacks do you say, you know what? Not only does his game translate to the NFL, it translates immediately.
Well, I think that comes down to the value that different coaches and teams and organizations ascribe to particular traits. Because you can look at a quarterback and his traits and say those traits in a vacuum, they translate. And we'll get more into the specifics of the quarterbacks, but you can look at Justin Fields' traits and say he has NFL quarterback traits. The question is, how refined is he in the execution of those traits? How ready is he to execute those traits on a weekly basis at a higher level of football? How advanced can any quarterback, we're not talking just Justin Fields here, how advanced can any quarterback be in the mental part of the game coming to the NFL, where defenses are much more detailed and nuanced, where there's more pressure schemes, where there's quicker athletes? So really, how advanced can any quarterback truly be? When you talk about quarterback play, particularly if you're a pocket quarterback, and don't forget, all quarterbacks are system quarterbacks, Jonathan, because that's the way the position is taught. The position is taught that way by coaches. Let's execute the system that we're putting in. So really, quarterbacks have to have a lot of knowledge, a lot of information that they're not going to have yet as rookies, which again, as I said, doesn't mean they can't come in and play as rookies. We saw what Justin Herbert did, played extremely well, but it's a process and it takes time. And no quarterback is really ready for all the nuances that define the position.
Well, let's riff here on the top five, the consensus five of this group, and Trevor Lawrence is quite the talent. Speaking of layers, let's discuss a few layers to his game and why he's the unquestioned pick for Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, with the understanding that no quarterback enters the league as a finished product. As you assess his game, Greg, what about Lawrence makes him the best that this group has to offer?
Well, and again, that could be in the eye of the beholder as well. But I think what you get with Lawrence is a kid who's had over 30 college starts at a high level of college football, played in big games. Now, you can almost go back to the Bill Parcells mantra of drafting quarterbacks high, that you want over 30 starts and with a 70% winning percentage or more. Lawrence fits into that. What he is a big kid. He's long, he's athletic, he's got a very good arm. You turn the tape on of Lawrence and you see a lot of throws where you say, wow, that's a really good throw. And he's willing to turn it loose. He's an aggressive thrower. He'll throw it down the field. I think when you talk about not being a finished product, one thing about Lawrence, and I'm very curious about this, is he's a little bit of a strider. He's got a little bit of an elongated delivery, not extreme, but a little bit of that kind of delivery. So when he gets pressure up the middle, he tends to rush his mechanics, and then that delivery has to speed up. And at times we've seen him, particularly in the playoff games the last 2 years in college, we've seen him, Jonathan, become a little bit scattershot, missing some throws high, because when you tend to rush your mechanics and you try to stride too much, you end up being high with your throws. But he is a talented kid. I don't know if his weight was a function this year of the fact that he had COVID, but you'd like to see him bulk up a little bit. At 6'6", he only weighed 213 pounds when he had that early pro day in February.
Clemson's offense features a lot of schemed plays to define reads and pass attempts. And that's not a knock. That's a sign of solid coaching, taking advantage of great talent. Did Lawrence offer, in your evaluation, a lot of second reaction ability in what you saw?
Oh, he can move well. There's no question that he can move well. And I thought he climbed the pocket well, meaning he stepped up into the pocket when he felt pressure on his outside. Another area I think he needs to improve is pocket movement laterally. And pocket movement is not running out of the pocket, Jonathan. Pocket movement is taking a step or two to your right, a step or two to your left. It's moving within the confines of an area, let's say the size of a boxing ring or even a little smaller. And the key part to that is you're not looking at the pass rush, you're feeling the pass rush. You're keeping your focus down the field. You're looking at the routes versus the coverage, and then resetting your feet so you can throw the ball on balance. That is what pocket movement is. You don't have to be a great athlete to do that. Tom Brady's been the master of pocket movement throughout his career, and you would not call him a great athlete by any means. But he's a great quarterback athlete, and that's the difference in those terms, just athlete versus quarterback athlete. So Trevor Lawrence needs to get better at pocket movement laterally, because that's something he will have to do in the NFL, where pressure is, there's more bodies around you in the NFL than there is in college football.
Well, and when he faced pressure inside, I know you've noticed and noted in the past that's where he the arm talent, maybe the accuracy, he rushed a little bit on some of the throws, and that's where Urban Meyer and Darrell Bevel and Brian Schottenheimer will be fine-tuning him a bit.
No question. I mean, when you come into this league, first of all, there's different parts to the quarterback position. There's the techniques and fundamentals, and it has to start there. Don't forget that college players get 20 hours with coaches during the college season. And I know a lot of these college players now work with quarterback gurus and quarterback coaches on the side, but it doesn't matter who you're working with. It starts with the mechanics of the position. It starts with how you drop back. It starts how you plant your back foot. You must be on balance. You must have a firm base. Where do you hold the ball? If you hold the ball too high, just think about this. If the ball's too high, you can't do anything comfortably athletically. You become very tight and rigid. So we call that ball carriage. Where do you hold the ball? You want to hold it so you're really comfortable in your movement. Then a critical part of playing quarterback, and this part's easy if you have a clean pocket, is you want to step to your throw. Your front foot and your eyes should all go to the exact same place. That's a little more difficult when you start to feel bodies around you, but that's something that you need to do. So it all starts with the mechanical and fundamental basics of how to throw a football. That's the starting point of how to play the position.
We're going to see a lot of highlights of him when Jacksonville selects him number 1, throwing the football. What did you think of Lawrence in the design runs that Clemson had for him, and how can that relate to how his athleticism might be utilized as a rookie?
I thought there were too many of them, Jonathan. And I don't think they'll do a lot of that in Jacksonville. It'll be situational. If it's 3rd and 2, yes, they'll have his own read and he could run the football. But I don't think once he gets to the NFL, you're going to see the design run game as a foundation of what they do, assuming it is Jacksonville. I don't think you'll see that as a foundation of what they do. He's a long, angular kid, and he would take some shots, and you really don't want that. You don't want the attrition, because it's just, he's a thrower. You want him to be a pocket quarterback who is capable of moving when it's demanded, and using his legs by design in specific down and distance situations and game situations. But he is not, in my view, a dual threat quarterback the way we think of dual threat quarterbacks.
The average football fan listening to the Cosell Files, they've seen Trevor Lawrence play. Maybe they've seen Zach Wilson, maybe.
Right.
Who played within a college offense that featured a lot of different things at BYU. He was under center, he was in shotgun, he was in pistol. There were RPO concepts, 5 wide, 2 tight. That versatility means what to you, Greg?
Well, it's funny you say that, because, I didn't think that the offense was really that difficult. I thought that it was kind of an air raid based offense. And in an air raid based offense, you're basically throwing the ball generally to the first guy that shows open. Now, Wilson, he's got an aggressive personality as a quarterback. He's got a very live, loose arm, not a power arm. For people who follow the NFL, think of someone like Matthew Stafford. He's got a power arm. Wilson's arm is not quite like that, but he's very live and loose with the way he throws it. It comes out well. A coach used this phrase to me, and I love it. He's got rhythm in his body. He's a very easy mover, Jonathan. And I thought that he had quick feet. I love where he held the ball, ready to snap off throws. He's a natural thrower. He's got a very easy, natural throwing motion. So there's a lot to like about Zach Wilson. You could argue that he fits the NFL game because he played with pocket efficiency and he had off-schedule movement. Now, he's not Patrick Mahomes, but there was an element of Patrick Mahomes to the way he played, because when Mahomes came out of Texas Tech, many were concerned, and it's easy now that we have access to the results, but many were concerned that there was a looseness, an undisciplined nature, a recklessness to his game. Zach Wilson has a bit of that to his game. So we'll see. We'll see how he handles the environment in which he's going into in the NFL, where he'll face far more pressure than he did at BYU.
Well, let's discuss that transition. You have noted that Wilson's overall skill set would transition well in a Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay type of system. The Jets have hired Mike LaFleur as their offensive coordinator.
Right.
And he, of course, was the passing game coordinator for Shanahan the last 3 years in San Francisco. What do you think about him within an offense like that?
I think he would be very effective in that offense, quite honestly, because I think what you're trying to do with Wilson, and maybe I'm old school, okay, Jonathan, but when all's said and done, you should not be throwing the ball off platform unless the defense truly demands it. Otherwise, you should be throwing the ball the same way all the time. You should be a baseball pitcher. That's one of the many things that has made Tom Brady the greatest of all time. He throws the ball the same way all the time. Repetitive mechanics. And your mechanics are tied into your drop. The mechanics are different on a 3-step drop, a 5-step drop, a 7-step drop, boot action. But the point is, those mechanics should be the same all the time unless the defense demands otherwise. And they're tied in to the route concepts, as I said. So he will be taught that if it is indeed the Jets, because that Shanahan style offense is very, very defined in how it's taught and how it's supposed to be executed. That is not a kind of, hey, let's go out and make a play kind of offense, which no offense really is, but that kind of offense, it needs to be executed the way it is structured and coached. And it'll be very interesting to see how Zach Wilson responds to that, because his lower body mechanics tended to be very inconsistent and erratic.
After Lawrence and Wilson, it's a what type of quarterback do you want discussion. There's Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones. Let's start with Fields and his athleticism, his talent and skill set. As you watch and rewatch him with Ohio State, how much does he grow on you?
He's grown on me a lot. And I could make the argument, and others can as well, because I've spoken to others. But as I rewatched him, I could make the argument that just if you're talking talent, that he's the equal or better than Zach Wilson. He's a bigger man with a bigger body. He's got a big arm. As coaches like to say, he's got a 65-plus yard arm. He's a power thrower, but he also showed the ability to feather and layer his throws when needed. He understood how to throw with pace and touch. We know that he can make second reaction plays, although he's not a runner in a strict sense, but you can use him that way. I think that the concern with Fields is, and this is always hard to know, and I want to be careful about this, because you have to know how a player is coached. And I don't know that. And nor does anybody else, for the most part, who talks about this. You don't know exactly how he's coached. But I got the sense at times that he didn't see it the way I thought he should have, but I could be wrong. I thought he left some throws on the field because of that. But he's got a lot of throwing talent, and you always have to define what that means. Arm talent is not just being able to throw the ball hard. As I said, he can feather and layer his throws. He has experience in the conventional play action pass game, which means that he's under center and he turns his back to the defense. And that is a learned trait, because when you turn your back to the defense and then snap your head back around, the defense is not in the same place they were before you turned your back. So you need to learn what to look at. That's coaching as well. What to look at based on the play call and the anticipated coverage. So all these things are learned traits. I think that Fields is a really talented guy, and I'm really curious to see where he goes and how he's coached.
You mentioned that touch. You didn't mention that as much with Wilson. Is there a clear separation of that within the two games?
I don't know if it's a clear separation. As I said, Wilson is a good thrower as well, but Fields, I think, they're different throwers, which is always why it's hard to make lists, because then it comes down to the eye of the beholder. Wilson has that live, loose arm. Fields does not. I wouldn't call his arm loose, but he can throw it with more power and more velocity. And he's one of those guys. I mean, there's guys that just have a really strong arm, and he's one of those guys. So, we'll see. It's in the eye of the beholder. And there's other things we don't know, or I don't know. Certainly teams will find this out, but we don't know what quarterbacks are asked to do at the line of scrimmage in college. Are they asked to do much at all? I remember watching the Indiana game with Fields, and Indiana ran something you rarely ever see in college football. In fact, you don't see it a ton in the NFL either. It's what we call a triple A gap blitz. The defense ends up bringing 3 players at different times through the A gap. Ohio State had a lot of problems with it. I don't know if that's on Fields. I don't know if that's on the center and the protection. That's something I don't know. Coaches and teams will find that out, but they struggled with that. So, these are things you have to find out. Quarterback, there's a lot of things that you have to learn and that have to become second nature. And college quarterbacks rarely come into the league having this kind of knowledge.
Discussing quarterbacks to begin the debut edition of the Cosell Files here on the Outkick Network. Greg, Trey Lance, limited film, giant potential. Like Wilson, he's played under center. He's played in the shotgun, and we've already mentioned the word traits quite a bit on this edition, and that's thrown around a lot this time of year. Is Lance the definition of a player who will be drafted on traits for his skill set?
Sure. I mean, he's 6'4", he's 224. He's a big kid. Everything about him is twitchy. He's got a live arm. He runs exceptionally well. As an offensive play caller, you think to yourself, okay, this kid gives me a lot of things to do. He played in an offense at North Dakota State where he was under center more than any quarterback in this draft. He executed the conventional play action pass game more than any quarterback in this draft. So he is the most refined and advanced, playing under center, turning his back to the defense, and snapping his head around. He's done that more than any quarterback in this draft. So you're looking at a guy now who's only started 17 games. He's played at a lower level of college football. What does that mean to you, Jonathan? It's going to mean something to different teams.
Watching him is tough for me. Like you see it different than I do, of course.
Right.
But Greg, watching him and with 17 games, you can watch a 30-minute highlight reel and get a sense of what he does. And any highlight reel can make a player look great.
Sure.
But with him, is it a lot of one read and then and again, we don't know how he was coached. Is it one read and then his athleticism just takes over and he makes a play? Like, what's he facing at that level, and how difficult is it to transition and project what he is in the NFL?
You know what? I would not necessarily say that's true. I thought that he flashed, didn't show it all the time, but I'd say he did flash progression reading traits with some what we call late in the down pocket ability, where he had to sit in the pocket and wait for the progression to play out. I call that elimination and isolation. I thought that based on the play design versus the coverage, he was able to eliminate what wasn't there and isolate where the ball should go. He did show pocket movement traits where he slid laterally and also climbed up in the pocket to avoid pressure. I think there was a good amount to like about Trey Lance. People will say he's not ready because he played at North Dakota State, and that could well be true. But I think the tape tells you that there's much to like about the traits he brings to the party.
Interested to see where he lands in the upcoming NFL draft. Greg, Mac Jones, he's regarded for having a great understanding of the game, knowing where to go with the football, reading coverages well. Did that stand out to you when you evaluated the Crimson Tide offense?
Well, here's something I learned a number of years ago, and sometimes it's hard to know when you're watching tape because you just don't know the play call versus the coverage sometimes. There's a difference between predetermination, in other words, being able to throw to your primary read because it's going to be there, versus anticipation. And a lot of times when you watch quarterbacks and they throw with really a good sense of timing and anticipation, you just don't know. Was that a great sense of timing and anticipation, or was that the play call and they got the coverage that they anticipated and he could throw to the primary? Sometimes you just don't know that. But there's no question that Mac Jones played the position with a really good feel for the timing, rhythm, and structure of his offense. That's the way he played. What Mac Jones is he's a highly efficient executor and ball distributor. That's what he is. He's not an off-script player. Now, in order to be really, really good at that, there's a couple of things you need to do. Now I'm talking NFL level. You need to win in the pre-snap phase, meaning when you come to the line of scrimmage, whether you're in hurry up, whether you've just come out of the huddle, you need to have a really good feel for what you're seeing, so you feel pretty strongly that you know where you're going with the football before the ball is even snapped. And number two, you need what we call functional knowledge of the defense. You don't need to know what all 11 players are going to do. You need to know the 2 or 3 players on the defense that impact that play call. So you need to win in the pre-snap phase, and you need functional knowledge of the defense. Both those things are harder in the NFL. My guess is Mac Jones will be able to do that. I don't know if he'll be able to do it week 1.
You know, I laugh at those who say he's not as mobile. Well, of course not. But I'm curious, Greg, get your answer on this. How is his mobility in the pocket? How's his footwork in the pocket? Because Tom Brady's not all that fast compared to his counterparts. We know how Manning was in the pocket. You can be quick in the pocket and not necessarily light of foot. How is Mac Jones in that area?
You know, I don't think he's quick-footed, but I think he shows some functional pocket movement in response to pressure. And I think that's something that I'm sure that he and his quarterback coach are working on, because he's going to have to master that to play. You know, he raises the question, and believe me, it's a very difficult question. I don't think there's an answer to this question. You know, in an ideal world, what you really want to do is give your quarterback answers with everything you do. Answers within structure. That's the goal of any play caller. Give your quarterback answers within structure, because no play caller designs plays to say, hey, you know what? They might take away your first 2 reads and then I just want you to run around. No play caller says that, Jonathan. So ultimately, you want to give your quarterback the answers to the test so that the ball can get out of his hands within some kind of structure. So the question is, there are plays in games, and this is game specific, situation specific. There are plays in games where the defense tactically defeats the system. What happens on those plays? Mac Jones, will he have an answer for that? I don't know. He's not going to be a true off-script player. Now, this doesn't mean he can't play by any means. You know, and it's, by the way, this is true of every quarterback. You want to give every quarterback the answer to the test. And I had a great conversation with Steve Young about this, you know, and he told me that Bill Walsh gave you the answers to the test, you know, so that you could throw the football. That's the goal for every offensive play caller. But there are times when the defense, you know, gets the answers before you get the answers. And like I said, there's no definitive answer to this, but I guess the question is, if you can't make off-script plays, can you be a high-end NFL starter in today's game? And as I said, I've talked to coaches; they don't know the answer either.
Greg, we're discussing answers to the test. Kyle Pitts may be a cheat code as we assess the tight ends and wide receivers here. And he lined up all over the field for Florida. And given his elite traits and the way that the NFL is played today and yesterday, can you say that the best prospect in this draft is Kyle Pitts because of how he's going to help a team win games immediately?
Well, I think he's the best prospect, but it's a great segue, and I'll tell you why. Because how do you help your quarterback get answers to the test before the snap? You do that with personnel and formation, because personnel and formation often dictates what you're going to get from the defense both from a personnel and an alignment standpoint. And the more information you can get from the defense with personnel and alignment, the better the quarterback will be, because he will then be able to get more information. And Kyle Pitts can be that guy. One of the things that we've seen in the league happening more and more every year, and certainly Travis Kelce and the Chiefs are the best example of it now, but teams have been doing it for a number of years, just not to the degree in which it's done now. I mean, for people who remember, you could go back to the Packers when they had Jermichael Finley, who was a great athlete at tight end. But what teams are doing now is they line up when they have 11 personnel on the field, meaning one back, one tight end, and 3 wide receivers. They line up the tight end as the single receiver to the short side of the field, to the boundary side. We call him the boundary X. And they'll line up with 3 wide receivers to the wide side of the field. And what that does is that forces the defense, not 100%, but a good percentage, and that's all football is. It's probability and tendency. A good percentage, it forces the defense to declare how they want to cover. So someone like Pitts, and he can beat corners, by the way. We saw him this year make a great catch against Jaycee Horn, the corner from South Carolina, who will likely be a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. We saw him beat Tyson Campbell from Georgia, who could well be a top 60 pick on a vertical route. So Pitts can line up anywhere, and he's going to help your quarterback get more information before the snap of the ball. The guy's a freak.
Another great example of that is Waddle from Alabama.
Yeah.
Small frame, but not nearly to that of what we're going to discuss with DeVonta Smith, but the slot receiver in Waddle, jet sweeps, screens. That's a player who dictates specific matchups for your offense. Explain what you see him at the pro level.
Well, he, to me, is not just a slot receiver, Jonathan. He's a movable chess piece. I think you can line him up outside. You can line up in the slot. He's a motion receiver, a movement receiver, jet sweeps, orbit reverses. He is incredibly explosive, both vertically, horizontally, and with the ball in his hands. You want to get him the ball. In an ideal world, you'd like to get him the ball on the move. I don't remember, and I say this honestly, and I've watched a lot of football, as you well know. I'm not sure I've seen a receiver who can change direction without losing any velocity and speed. That, to me, is what he does exceptionally well. And like I said, I just don't know if I've seen a guy like that. I mean, how controlled and movement efficient he is playing at such a high velocity and speed, to me, is off the charts.
So he's got the Tyreek Hill quality to him.
Without question.
Yeah.
Without question. He to me is the most Tyreek Hillish receiver in this draft class. And there's a lot of guys, the phrase that's come into play, and it's a major part of college, and it's in the NFL as well, is manufactured touches. And we're past the point where that means gimmick, where these are not gimmick players. It just means you're creating offense to get these guys the ball in space where they have room. And that's what you're trying to do with manufactured touches. That's why when you say slot, a lot of these kinds of receivers, Elijah Moore is going to fit into that category. Maybe Rondale Moore, Kadarius Toney to some extent. These guys, you want to get them the ball. So you try to create ways in which to do that. And it's not just old school slot.
DeVonta Smith, I mentioned small frame, and that's the best way to describe him. He's 166 pounds officially.
Yeah.
How concerning is that? Are we overplaying that? Does the film just tell you, what, this guy's a straight receiver, great route runner. He's going to have success.
Great receiving traits, nuanced, detailed, really good at giving quarterbacks indicators and then separating. Great phrase, indicate and separate. He's really good at that. He's refined as a route runner, knows how to use his vertical stem, great separation quickness. He can break and cut without losing speed. There's so much to like about him. All I'm saying is this, okay? The 166 pounds will be discussed in draft meetings across the league. It will be. I can't tell you what the conclusion will be with each specific team, but it will be discussed. So having said that, what you want with DeVonta Smith is you want him off the ball, meaning he's a Z receiver. The Z receiver does not line up right on the line of scrimmage. He lines up just off the ball. And he's the movement receiver. He's the motion receiver. Because what you want with Smith, Jonathan, is you want him to be able to get free access without being jammed, free access off the line of scrimmage so he could stride out. This kid is a long, thin, silky smooth, linear strider. You want him to be able to stride. He's super competitive, runs great routes, can track the deep ball, has great body control, really good hands. There's so much to like about DeVonta Smith. And like I said, I can't sit here and say that the 166 pounds means nothing, because that makes him an exception and an outlier. But it will be discussed in draft meetings.
Well, you like Smith and Waddle. You love Jamar Chase. And
I do.
One thing that stood out to me in chatting with you over the years, it's hard to determine effort on a play. Like it's hard to judge the mentality of a player. But you have noted many times, it's not that hard to pinpoint the alphas on the gridiron.
Yeah.
And he's one of those.
He's an alpha dog for sure. I mean, this kid, he's got a type A personality. He plays the game physically. He's competitive. He's proactively aggressive. He loves the physical part of the game. And think about the game now. What do we see in the passing games? We see more RPOs, more quick game. So what does that mean for routes? It means more slant routes, more glance routes. The difference there is a slant route is usually 3 steps and the receiver cuts. A glance route is normally 5 steps and the receiver breaks. But they're quick in-breaking routes. And what you're hoping is that the receiver can make those catches and then run after catch. Chase is that guy. He's physical. He's hard to bring down. He reminded me of both DeAndre Hopkins and Steve Smith in the way in which he plays the game. This guy has good size, not great size, good size, play strength, hands, body control, great balance. He can burst. He can run vertically. He's physical and mentally tough. To me, he's got everything you look for in a wideout. And I think this guy has special traits for a wideout.
You know, if you're in a fight, you want him on your side, right? Like you mentioned the quick routes and the fight for the first down and the run after catch and the big play potential. He's got it all there.
You know, he reminded me in some ways too of another guy. Chase, he ran really well on his pro day. You know, he ran a 4.38. I wouldn't call him a burner though, as a vertical guy. Like he didn't just blow past corners. He did get beyond SEC corners, but I thought he had subtle hand and arm movements to create separation. And the guy who that reminded me of was a little bigger than him, but it was Michael Irvin. And, you know, you remember Michael Irvin.
Sure.
And I think that's a knack. And I think this kid has that knack of how to use his arms to separate without making it look like it's offensive pass interference. And, you know, he just plays a very, very physical game. And that's him. You know, as you said, he's an alpha dog. And that's just the way he plays.
We saw a lot of head-to-head matchups with wide receiver class this year and the top corners of this draft. And I feel like if I just asked you who's the best of this group of the corners, it's a tough question to answer because of the injury concerns with Caleb Farley and the fact that Surtain and Horn both feature ideal traits for the outside corner role. But instead of best corner, Greg, I'll ask, who's the most complete corner from this class?
Well, again, teams will see it differently. I can tell you that for me, I loved Patrick Surtain, loved watching his tape. Prototypical size and length, elite press man-to-man coverage traits. And there's always a place for that in the NFL, Jonathan, as you know. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a guy, you know, you might not say he's sudden and twitchy because he's so smooth. I mean, this guy played what we call mirror match press man. And for those that don't know that term, what that means is you don't necessarily jam physically the receiver. You wait for the receiver to declare his release, and then you simply get in his hip pocket. So you're matching his route. Mirror match press man. That's what that means. in that way, he kind of reminded me of Champ Bailey, who was a master of mirror match press man. But Surtain played all different kinds of coverage because Alabama plays all different kinds of coverage. Plus, he's physical and competitive. He tackled in the run game. I came away watching, and I think I've watched about 20 plus corners. I felt like he was the most complete, fundamentally sound corner prospect in this draft. He just, to me, it was like he was born to play mirror match press man. And for those who don't know, obviously his dad was an excellent corner in the league for a number of years.
And then there's Jaycee Horn. You know, both he and Surtain played in the SEC.
Yeah.
The profile of the cornerback that the NFL teams covet in today's game. How easy does Horn's game come across? And is, for lack of a better way to phrase this, does Surtain just make it look easier? Is there a smoothness to Surtain that Horn didn't possess?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but they both check a lot of the boxes. I mean, Horn's got size, length. He's physical. He's competitive. That shows up on tape. He's more physical as a press man corner, but he can play mirror match press man as well. But he did have a glaring tendency, and this is part of his competitiveness, and it's allowed in college. So he wasn't doing anything wrong, but he did have a tendency to be handsy and grabby through receivers' route stems. And in college, you can do that, but in the NFL, you can't. So that's going to have to be coached out of him, but he certainly checks all the boxes. The question is, can it be coached out of him? Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. But he was a fun guy to watch because you could see his competitiveness, and I thought he played zone coverage really well too. I thought he had a really good understanding of routes, route concepts. He's a really good prospect.
Is Farley also in this category of the man corners?
Yes.
that teams want?
Yeah, the problem with Farley is he's had 2 back surgeries. And you know, I've been fortunate enough to be on some calls with doctors talking about you know, injuries with players in this draft, and there'll be a major concern with him there just because he's had 2 back surgeries, and from what these doctors say, there's a strong likelihood he'll need another one relatively sooner than later, whatever that means. It's not an exact science. Maybe you can go 7 years and not have another, and you get a great corner.
Right.
I mean, because this kid is, you know, it's funny. I think his height and his weight are similar to Surtain, but they're just built differently. This kid has a strong looking frame. He looks powerful. His movements are explosive. He's a more explosive mover than a smooth mover. Don't forget, this kid was a high school quarterback. He does not have a lot of experience playing corner. So in watching his tape, you know, I thought that he was really good in press man. I thought he needs some work to do in zone for this reason. What do you need to do in zone, Jonathan? You need to be able to recognize receiver distribution, receiver location. Receiver distribution means how many receivers are to your side. How are their splits? Their splits tell you something about the kind of combination routes that will be run. He doesn't have a lot of experience with that. So then you have to either carry receivers, pass them on to a teammate because it's zone. This is an area in which he needs a lot of work because he didn't grow up playing the corner position. But he's a tough looking athlete. He's an explosive athlete. And if he could, you know, he needed to play more football. He obviously opted out, but he just needs to play more football.
You know, there are some opt-outs across the board here, and that's one of the big factors of the 21 draft. We can find that up front on the defensive line as well, or in the front 7 altogether. But top to bottom, Greg, and I mentioned to begin the file here for file 1 of very defensive scheme specific traits for the pass rushers. Is Jaylen Phillips the most specific to a 4-3 player that's a high pass rusher in this draft of your evaluation? And again, that's not a knock. That's just the build and the type of player that he is.
Well, remember one thing. Every team has a base defense. It's either a 3-4 or what has now become in many cases a 5-2, but it's a 3-4 or a 4-3. Okay. But they're only going to play in that base defense, I don't know, 25, 30, maybe 35% of the snaps, depending on the
Yeah,
team.
maybe.
Some teams play their sub, meaning 5, 6 defensive backs. Some teams play in that 80% of their snaps. So a team might only play in their base 20%. So when all's said and done, Jonathan, an edge player is being drafted to rush the quarterback. Now, Phillips in your base, yes, he's a DN. He's a 4-3 DN. He's not an outside linebacker in a 3-4. So 3-4 teams will not likely look at him, but at the end of the day, he's a pass rusher. And I think he's the best pass rush prospect in this draft. He just has some medical issues that, again, I don't know how teams see that, but I think that if he was a totally clean player, you're talking about a top 10, top 12 pick, but whether that happens, I can't say. But he's got size, length, athleticism, suddenness, explosiveness, flexibility, power, balance, competitiveness. To me, he checks every box for an edge pass rusher.
Well, and as we wrap up, just to give the reverse of that, who's the most versatile pass rusher of your evaluations?
Most versatile? You mean a guy that can line up all over?
All over. Let me give you an example of who I'm thinking of, and you see if you agree. Zaven Collins. Because I'm thinking front seven. I think he can rush the passer in a 3-4 as an outside linebacker scheme. Many say he's an inside player. I like that versatility. I'm curious if you agree with that, and if there's someone else that comes to mind that you feel like is more versatile than a player like Collins.
Well, he's got a ton of versatility. Now, in his recheck, he weighed 270 pounds today, and that's a little high.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how he sees himself and how teams will see him at 270. Because look, if he played at, let's say, 255, 260, there's no question he played as an athlete. In fact, he played more as an athlete, even though he weighed 260, than a physical power player. But you start getting to 270, and I'm not sure that could change how teams see him. He did rush the quarterback at times at Tulsa. I thought that was an area that he needs development. He was somewhat limited in doing that because he didn't do it a ton. But if he came in at 270, and obviously he knows he's 270, it's not a surprise. I'm wondering if he sees himself more as a defensive end than as a linebacker, how he pictures himself. So now I'm not sure, because I tell you what, this kid was a very smooth mover for 259 pounds. I don't know what he'll be at 270. He struck me as being multi-positional, that you can move all around a defensive front, both in linebacker positions and in D-line positions. But, I think that's a little bit of a fly in the ointment. I don't know how that's going to play out.
Well, hopefully he doesn't see himself as a defensive tackle. And
no. Hopefully by draft time, he's not 290.
Right, exactly. Greg, this has been a lot of fun to kick off the Cosell Files on Outkick. I'm thrilled for this. I can't wait to do this each week.
No, I'm really excited. You know me, Jonathan. I just love talking ball.
Yeah.
I just want people to understand, for me, it's about the process. There's so many variables. These are 20-year-old kids. They're not totally defined and totally finished. There's coaching, there's scheme, there's organization, there's who they play with. There's so many factors that take what you see on tape, and that's what I do. I sit here and watch tape. There's so many factors with what you see on tape, and then how their transition and projection is impacted. So that, that's something I just hope people can understand.
We are here every single week from the NFL draft all the way through the regular season. We'll be breaking down games, previewing the upcoming NFL weekend. And as we close File 1, we hope you enjoyed the first podcast, and we hope you'll help us spread the word about the Cosell Files. As a subscriber, every Thursday afternoon, expect a new podcast ready for you at your convenience. And we hope you'll subscribe. We hope that you'll rate and review. And again, subscribe and make sure you get that alert every Thursday afternoon that the latest Cosell Files is available for you. For Greg Cosell, I'm Jonathan Hutton. We are back next week for the Cosell Files on the Outkick Network.